down here checking me
Niles,
out, bro.
what's up, baby?
Thanks a lot for coming down here. We did the first interview virtually and then running back. But this time, you know what? Instead of doing a virtual interview, let's go ahead and do it in your home state because, as mentioned, as we talked about plenty of times before, we both went to the same undergrad university.
All right.
If anybody can see it, A&T,
A&T in
loud
the
and
house.
proud.
Aggie land,
Aggie land.
always.
And I thought in having to redo this interview again, it's better to, I always like to do the interviews in person,
Absolutely.
but obviously can't have everybody in person, right? So why not do it? I asked you, what are you doing on September 9th?
Right.
And you said, you could be to the game. I said, I'm coming to the game too.
Yeah.
So we already had those things planned. And so our paths collided again, as they
Right.
have been for the past 3 or 4 years.
Absolutely.
And I also thought it'd be great because, you know, your background, you know, where you come from, which we'll get into a minute, to where you end up going to school.
Absolutely.
And then obviously what you've been doing for HBCUs once you hit your graduate education and then the platform you built there.
Yeah.
So why not have you not only in your home state, but also in your element supporting your school. So it made sense to run this back, and it actually worked out in our favor
Yeah,
at
good
the end
deal.
of the day.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely worked out for the
yeah,
best, you know, coming down Aggie-Eagle Classic Weekend.
yeah,
Be able to do it definitely worked out for the
yeah,
best, you know, coming down Aggie-Eagle Classic Weekend.
yeah,
Be able to do this, you know, so it's glad
yeah,
to see you in person,
yeah,
get to talk in person, sit back and chill,
yeah.
have a nice conversation, so I definitely appreciate the invite.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot for coming down. Okay, so let's get back into it. Born and raised in Durham, North Carolina. Tell me a little bit. We talked before about this. Tell me a little bit about the history of Durham and you know how that influenced you to be the person you are today.
Yeah, Durham was a very interesting place, you know. I came up in a time in Durham where it was somewhat of in a transition in term economically. You know, it was kind of on the back of Reaganomics, the peak crack era. It was also at a time when, if you know anything about the history of Durham, is very associated with Raleigh, the capital, which is right next door, which during the 70s and 80s, that area really tried to push the economic growth into Research Triangle Park.
Right.
And so with that, you saw a lot of the investment in that area go out into the suburbs, which really created a hole within the urban core in the inner city and really took a lot of economic viability out of that area. But kind of growing up at that time, it was a bit of a challenge. But then you also came up in a time that it was built on the history of what Durham was like
Right.
prior to that particular time. So
Okay.
if you know anything about the history of Durham first, I mean, Durham is mostly associated with being the home of Duke University, which is a major part, a major economic driver for
Right.
the city. But prior to that, it was a tobacco hub, and that's where the Duke
Okay.
family and other entrepreneurs made their millions
Right.
in the tobacco industry.
Right.
And another thing that kind of led out of that is that Durham had a very strong burgeoning black middle class. You know,
Okay. Yeah.
so W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington both wrote papers on Black Durham and its vitality as a black economic hub. You know, and this was the same time in which a lot of people are more familiar with North Tulsa as being Black Wall Street. Durham also had a
Right.
Black Wall Street, and it had
That
a
is okay.
predominantly black enclave by the name of Hayti. And in the New Negro Anthology, the historian E. Franklin Frazier coined Durham as the capital of the black middle class. And this was the same time in which we're mostly familiar with Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So
Okay.
Durham also had, and so that was the kind of history that we grew up around. And also, another thing about Durham in the state of North Carolina, it has the most historically black colleges than any other state, maybe next to Virginia. I think there's 13 HBCUs across the whole state. So I grew
Wow.
up in a time
That
where
is true.
from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, most of my teachers were people who came out of historically black colleges, people that looked like me, and they kind of educated me to that history and where I came from, and kind of helped compel me as a person and create the identity that I have now.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. Woo. All right. So the history of Durham is deep, and to your point, I don't think a lot of people know that. We all focus on Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? Rightfully so. That
Hmm.
has,
Yeah.
there's a stain there with that situation, and so that's why they're remembered, et cetera, and very people are more familiar with that city. But to your point, Durham was a haven for Black individuals as well. And I think last time we talked, there was another gentleman by name of C.C. Spaulding,
Yeah.
yeah, who he had the first Black life insurance company.
So in Durham's Black Wall Street, one
Hmm.
of the founding institutions is the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company,
Okay.
one of the first all black life insurance companies. And C.C. Spaulding, along with John Merrick and C.C. Spaulding's uncle, Dr. Aaron Moore, who
Okay.
was a graduate of Shaw University, they were the founders of North Carolina Mutual. And John Merrick and Aaron Moore were the two founding members, and they kind of grew C.C. Spaulding to be the manager as they matriculated out or when they passed away. So at the
Wow.
one point in time, C.C. Spaulding was one of the richest black men in America. You know, same time that Madam C.J. Walker is credited as being the most wealthy black entrepreneur in America. You know, so
Wow.
they were very influential at the particular time. They had also had some ties to the White House. You know, so a lot of promising entrepreneurs at the time in Durham.
Oh man, that's deep, man. Shout out to Durham, North Carolina.
Yeah,
That's
for sure,
amazing, man.
absolutely.
I'm glad we got to share that with the audience. I'm sure outside
And
of North Carolina. Go ahead,
another
keep dropping it. Keep
another
dropping it.
connection,
Okay.
you know, with the A&T connection. I was doing a little research this past year. You know, Merrick Hall, which is the business school at A&T,
Okay.
is named for Merrick. So I was say that name sounds familiar. You know, even when I was on campus, I was like, why
Okay.
is his name Merrick Hall? So I did a little digging. I'm a history buff, you know,
Right.
so I went into the A&T archives and come to find out that Merrick Hall at A&T was named for John Merrick's son, who John Merrick didn't have. He wasn't formally educated. He was a bar. He had to start his career as a barber, but he sent his son to A&T, who was a graduate of the business school and became very philanthropic as an alumni who gave back to the school, and the business school was eventually named after him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Woo. Deep, man. Let's pause a bit. Pause the interview. Let's pause the interview. You dropping too much history on us right now, man.
Yeah.
Okay. And another thing you pointed out that I liked was the fact that North Carolina is a haven for HBCUs,
Absolutely.
and not many people may know that.
Mm.
There's a lot of other popular HBCUs throughout the South for
Mm.
sure,
Yeah.
but North Carolina is a major state with HBCUs littered across the state. And that's
Hmm.
when I moved down here when I was young from Philadelphia. Um, I was looking at schools and everybody was like HBCU. I didn't even know what HBCU was, and
Right.
now there's HBCUs in Philly,
Hmm.
that being Lincoln, Cheney, Del State's nearby. But man, when I moved down to North Carolina and I was looking to go to college, like people were saying to me, "Have you're not thinking?" They're looking at me like I'm crazy. You're not. Have you not? You don't have an HBCU on your list?
Right.
I was like, "Nah, only HBCU I know is back home." So to your point, man, let's list some of those HBCUs. You got not all of them, but to say the Raleigh Durham area, there's like three, right?
So you got Shaw and St. Aug in Raleigh,
Okay.
North Carolina Central, which is in Durham,
Okay.
A&T in Greensboro,
Okay.
got Winston-Salem State,
Right.
Fayetteville State,
Fayetteville,
Elizabeth City State.
Elizabeth City.
You got Livingstone College,
Whew.
Barbara Scotia College,
Whew.
Johnson C. Smith in Charlotte,
Oh,
and I know I'm leaving off
oh man,
maybe a couple.
that's cool, man.
Yeah,
I think that's another lesson for everyone
yeah,
watching. If you want to go to HBCU, definitely check out the state of North Carolina because
absolutely.
they got some amazing HBCUs here. Okay, so you talked about your teachers giving you influence as in school. So what school did you go to again? What high school did you go to?
I graduated from Hillside High School. I also
Okay.
went to Durham High School as well.
Okay. Shout out to Hillside. Shout
Yeah,
out to Durham
definitely shout out to the Hill.
for sure. And then so then after high school, you graduated, and then well, you know what? Let's go back a little bit. You got brothers and sisters, right?
Yep.
Let's
Hmm.
talk about their influence in your life when you were younger.
Definitely, man. I'm the youngest of five. It was three of us in the household.
Okay.
Definitely, my brother is 5 years older than I am. My sister's 3 years older than I
Okay.
am. And they definitely had a big influence on me. Coming up, you know, I was exposed to things a lot earlier than
Hmm.
somebody at different ages that I was because I had those older siblings, you know.
Okay.
And
Right.
my sister went to A&T,
Cool.
before I did, you know,
Okay.
so I kind of followed her path a little bit, you know,
Right.
and follow her up to A&T, and you know, so definitely good to have those older siblings
Right. So that's a good point, a segue into how you got to A&T. So you're from Durham.
for sure.
We just named all the HBCUs in the state.
Yeah.
There's several in the city of Durham slash Raleigh
Hmm.
area, right? Um, what made you come down to Greensboro to go to A&T? Your
I
sister only
No,
or
no,
anything
no,
else?
definitely not, man. I definitely
Okay.
wanted to get away from home. You know,
Yeah.
like I said, one thing in living in Durham at that particular time, you know, you wanted to get away from home as fast as possible. You know, so
Hmm.
I wanted to get out, spread my wings. You know, I thought I wanted to go to another school. Long story short, I ended up at A&T. You know, matter of fact, my sister and my stepsister were here at the same time. You know, so I
Wow.
just kind of followed up with them, and
Okay.
yeah, came on.
So it's comfortable, it's familiar.
Yeah.
Okay, then. All right. So you ended up. Okay. So you're in your youth. You're in Durham. You end up going to A&T. So let's talk about how you going to A&T was a game changer in your life altogether. Because I remember when we talked before, you started off at T, but you weren't the most scholarly. You're not the polished gentleman you are now. Let me look at you. You're dressed up, smooth. Look, you got your collar going. I mean, you look like a proud alum.
Yeah.
But when you showed up to T, that you probably were just running around trying to figure things out. Talk about that. Your young days at T.
Yeah, man. First of all, I mean, I didn't even see myself going to A&T. You know,
Okay.
I had applied to go to Johnson C. Smith
Oh
University,
wow.
and coming out of high school, I didn't really know too much about college. Didn't go any college tours or something like that. For some reason, I had it in my mind. I was like, okay, Charlotte's the biggest city in North Carolina. That'll be cool to get away from home. So I applied to Johnson C. Smith. You know, my pops, he was a truck driver. He didn't want us to have any debt or anything like that. He was like, you know, I'll pay for you guys to go straight out of pocket. But he was like, you know, I can't pay for no private school. You know, why don't you
Mm-hmm.
go to a state school? It's much cheaper. Your sisters is up there.
Mm-hmm.
At the time when he told me that, I was a little tight about it. You know, so I was like, oh man, I'm gonna go see Smith. But I didn't know no better. So when I applied to A&T, I kind of did it off on the humbug. I think I applied like school started in August. I might have sent in the application in like June or something like
Wow.
that. I didn't even I didn't even put an application fee with it, you know. So I think I owed A&T like $50 or something like that for an application fee. So I
Okay.
was like, you know, I'll apply. You know,
Yeah.
if I get in, I get in. Like I said, and I got in. They called. I think they gave me acceptance letter in like July, early August or something like that. I
Right.
didn't know if I even had the grades for it at the time.
Right.
So when I came in, you know, like that was just an example of me not being ready for that collegiate life or that level of academics. You know, me
Mm-hmm.
coming out of high school, I really, because I actually jumped around to a couple of high schools, so I really wasn't completely focused
Right.
in my
Yeah.
academics and my schoolwork at the time. So when I came into A&T, I was a knucklehead, just kind of stumbling around the yard, just trying to figure out my way in life. You know, that was the first time I was away from home, so it took me a while to kind of get my footing academically.
Right, dude. That's probably one reason why we vibe so well because I definitely had the same experience where I went to like four different high schools, several in Philly. I went to two down here in
Mm,
North Carolina.
mm,
I went to Dudley High School
mm-hmm.
for a hot second, and then I went to Northeast Guilford High School for a
Wow.
hot second.
Mm,
Ended up graduating there, but
wow.
anyway, just jumping around, no real stability,
Yeah,
trying to figure it out, and just same thing. I applied to A&T on a whim
yeah.
and got in. But anyway, back to you. So okay, so you're at A&T. There was some really. What did you start off in what did you major in when you first started off at A&T?
Psychology.
Psychology.
Yeah,
Okay.
my undergraduate.
And as you're going to school, um, there was a major change in your life.
Mm-hmm.
You actually you changed religions.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
So when I was at A&T, I mean, college, for the most part, it has like a direct purpose and an indirect purpose.
Right.
Directly, it's supposed to teach you skills that you come out and are marketable to be able to get a job. That's like its indirect purpose,
Right.
you know, but it has this indirect purpose of being somewhere that nurtures you in this early part of your adulthood, in the early part of your life that kind of catalyzes who you are as a person. So when I was at A&T, I was kind of like, you know, stumbling around a little bit. So, and like one day I was sitting in the crib with some of the homies. We were sitting down at the table doing some things we weren't supposed to be doing, and
Right, right, right.
and I'm looking at my partners that I'm with, and a couple of them they were like second generation college students, and and one of my roommate, his pops was pretty wealthy. He was kind of footing the bill for the rent, and I'm looking at them like one thing about me, kind of going back to my history. My dad was a truck driver, and he used to come pick us up, me and my brothers, like every summer, or when
Okay.
he had a job in the local area, and he moved furniture across the country.
Okay.
So I always saw my dad work from the time I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I used to work with him, and I see how hard he sweat. And so one day I'm sitting in my house, in my apartment one day with a couple of my homies, and I'm looking around at them, and all of us are like squandering the opportunity
Yeah,
that
right.
we got. But
Okay.
I'm taking it personal. I'm thinking like I'm squandering my dad's hard work. I know my pops is out there grinding for me. I've seen him. I've been with him, and I've been with him. We like spend the summer in Florida. It's like 90 degrees. Like you in the back of a 18-wheeler truck burning up, sweating. So I'm like,
Hmm.
nah, I can't even get down like this.
Right.
So that's what kind of made me buckle down academically, but it also kind of made me buckle down as a person
Mm.
and as a man, and kind of like say, okay, it's time to strap up.
Right.
And so with that, it kind of led me on this journey to kind of being a more formal person, or a person that was more kind of about their business. So one thing that I wanted to do was, I had this kind of like burgeoning interest in religion,
Hmm.
and how I saw myself in a religion in terms of my interpersonal growth.
Okay. Okay.
So I had always had this, prior to this, I had this belief in Islam that was kind of bubbling in my heart on a lower level, because I came across Islam when I was probably like 14 or 15 years old,
And that was back in Durham.
back in Durham. I was out, one day I'm gonna become a Muslim one day, but I didn't have anybody that push me to say, okay, this is something that you need to do. I'm a Muslim. I'm a teach you
Hmm.
what this means and what that means. I just kind of, so it was something I kind of came across
Right.
by happenstance.
Right.
It's like, I learned about what Islam was, that Islam is the belief in one God,
Right.
and that Muhammad is the messenger. I kind of grew up in the church. My uncle was a Baptist minister, so I used to go to Sunday school
Hmm.
with him, pack up in the car with me and my brothers and sisters and my
What
cousins.
type of car did your uncle drive?
Yeah, he always used to have a big Cadillac. So
Yeah.
one of them big joints, and the big bench seat
Yeah.
and the armrest, and
Right.
me and my cousin, we used to always argue like who could ride up in on the seat. We used to call it the hump.
Yeah.
It's like the armrest. That was back in the day when you could ride in the front seat of the car
Right.
with no seatbelt.
Yeah.
So so I said, okay, while I'm going on this journey of kind of being a little more serious person,
Hmm.
I'm gonna look into this religious thing
Okay.
a little bit deeper,
Right.
try to go in that direction. And I had this partner that I met in the 11th grade. He
Hmm.
was a Muslim, but we used to run the streets together, kind of do things. And he never really pushed religion on me, but I used to have him ask him certain questions. He was from New York,
Okay.
and he had came down to Durham and went to high school. And so I used to like, yeah, actually that was kind of one of the reasons I pulled him into my crew. He was kind of smooth dude. So I was like, come hang with me. And I used to ask him certain stuff about religion
Hmm.
every now and then. And he ended up going back to New York. Somehow, serendipitously, we ended up in Greensboro together at the
That's crazy.
same time. And I started to ask him more about Islam, and I was like, where do the Muslims go? Or,
Yeah.
well, when do they go? Do they go like on Sunday? He's like, nah,
Yeah.
you go to Juma on Friday. You go to Friday prayers. I was like, all right. He's like, let's go. He's like, all right, you find somewhere,
Yeah.
let's go. So ended up finding a mosque in Greensboro.
Okay.
We started going to Friday prayers.
Okay.
One brother, I met him at the fish spot. He used to come pick us up.
Okay.
Long story short, boom bap. I ended up just kind of accepting Islam there, and then that was kind of like made me buckle down and kind of really transition in my life into something that was like really impactful to this day.
Wow, man. And that all happened you had exposure when you were young,
Hmm.
but it really solidified itself when you were at A&T.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And then there were some brothers at A&T that were also Islamic.
Um, at A&T, no.
Okay. Okay. Not as okay.
Nah, it was probably like maybe four of us.
Oh wow. Okay. I
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And another, crazy thing, and it's not crazy because one thing about Islam is that we believe in the divine decree.
Okay.
So a lot of these little anecdotes, they seem like they're just circumstantial,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all about what's decreed for you.
Mm-hmm.
My homie that I went to high school with, or he went to high school, we went to high school together, or we used to run in the same circles in Durham. We're never really like tight in Durham, but he was a year ahead of me. And when I came to A&T, we run in the same circles. So one day we going to me in summer school
Right.
after my sophomore year.
Okay.
He picks me up in the car. I sit me in the back seat. We done sat, chopped it up plenty of times.
Yeah.
Did a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
We never talked about religion each other. I
Right.
never knew he had the interest in this. And I see a book. I'm sitting in the back seat of his car. I see a book under his book bag, and I see it's a picture of like the Kaaba, which is in Mecca, which is the
Okay.
where all the Muslims pray. And I'm like, man, I picked this. I was like, what you doing with this? It's like, oh man, I'm Muslim, man. I just took my shahada, which is my declaration. I took my shahada like 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I said, man, stop lying. I said, man, I just took my shahada like a week ago, bro. He's like, what you talking about? I said,
Right.
man, so we got a link.
Right.
So since then, man, me and him, man, we've been like butter and toast,
Okay. Okay.
and like, and we used to go to a little mosque that was starting up down in Greensboro, and we was really tight. And at a particular time, it was a big um, immigrant movement of people from Niger
Okay.
that was coming into Greensboro, and they would teach us stuff about Islam because we would see them at the mosque, but they didn't know, they hardly knew any English,
Mm.
but they would tell you like they said this sunnah, this no sunnah, which is like something that emulates the Prophet Muhammad. So they would
Okay.
teach us like that. And so me and him, we was probably really hard on
Okay.
the yard at the time. There was a couple of guys that we met that had grew up Muslim, but it probably was maybe like 3, 4, maybe 5 of us at the time.
Right.
It
Right.
wasn't a big community on
Yeah.
campus.
And I can imagine because now we speaking to North Carolina roots.
Yeah,
North Carolina is a part of the Bible Belt
absolutely.
for sure. And I remember when I came down here, I was got involved in youth group at different
Yeah.
churches and stuff like that. And it was a lot stronger down here than it is. We're coming back even from Philadelphia because
Hmm.
everybody, in my crews that I ran in, had a strong religious tie here to Christianity, especially Southern Baptists.
Hmm.
You had some Methodists in there. Um, so no, to your point, yeah, because imagine everyone, majority of people at school were of Christian religion, and there wasn't that many Muslims. It probably changes the more you go north.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It probably changes the more you go north. Because in Philadelphia, huge, as you
Absolutely.
know, Delaware is a spot up there. Chicago got some brothers of Islam up there and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So okay, so let's talk about A&T overall. So you graduate with a psych degree, and then you graduate. Wait. Let's rewind. Let's rewind back. Let's rewind back. You talked about your sister and your stepsister. So they graduated.
Hmm.
What's their names?
My stepsister's name is Tara, and my sister her name is Shantia.
Okay, shout out to your sisters.
For sure.
So they graduated, but then you got a brother
Hmm.
who went to the military,
Hmm.
and then what happened after that? Talk about your brother.
So my older brother, he graduated high school, and he went into the Navy for a
Okay.
few years. Then he came back. Eventually, he ended up becoming Muslim, accepting Islam.
Your brother?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my older brother, he's Muslim as well. He's been Muslim to this day.
Awesome, man.
And so, yeah.
That's cool, man. And that happened while he was at A&T as
Yeah,
well.
for sure. Yep.
Phew. Okay, cool, man. So at one point in time, your whole entire sibling crew was at A&T.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Stepsister, sister, brother,
Yeah.
and you.
I also have a cousin
Okay.
who's basically like my brother. We were born in the same year,
Okay.
and we've been tight like this since we was like, playing with He-Mans and
Yeah,
Transformers.
yeah.
He was at A&T too, so he came up. He was a year after me. He came up. We all in the yard at the same time.
Wow, man.
He eventually became Muslim as well.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm laughing because, you don't really hear stories like that very often where people are converting as an adult in college.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like
And,
that's
and it's
big.
definitely something that was a little bit, I want to say strange, but you'll see that it's not common coming from the South.
Coming from exactly in the South. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
you're
point.
coming from the South. You got like you know, if you change from Christianity in the South, you're doing something.
Yeah.
And then for your brother to do it, and then
Yeah.
for your cousin to
Cousin,
do it,
yeah.
and then like you said, like, and then all three, and have all my siblings and me, at A&T at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
That was a kind of an accomplishment as well.
Yeah, no, they're definitely, man. So that's cool because, A&T definitely has a familial vibe.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously you guys were related, but
yeah,
um, A&T definitely has that culture where it's inviting
mm-hmm,
and people really connect.
yeah,
And you're not the only person I've heard where, oh, my brother, my sister, my cousin have gone there as well. And that happens to a lot of schools. But some schools OD on the families also attending the schools,
yeah,
from grandparents to brother, sister, cousin, mother, father, so that really happens at A&T, like
yeah,
other schools in the country.
yeah,
Um, you know, there's schools in America where you might be the only person in your family that ever attended, and there's schools where they literally hook on to the family
yeah,
lineage, and the rest is history
yeah,
from there.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
man, my niece is here now, man. So
your niece is here?
yeah, man, yeah, yeah. She just started her sophomore year, man. So I'm glad we kind of passed that on
Yeah,
to another generation
yeah.
to kind of continue that. I got another little cousin, man. He ended up going to Central. We always like, man, what you doing, man?
Right, 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 right.
You gotta go to the team, man. Like, what's
So okay, okay, okay. So I get it. And you kind of wanted to get away from home, so you didn't go to Central,
yeah,
and that's cool. And this is all serendipitous because we're here talking. We'll be at the game pretty
yeah, absolutely.
shortly. A&T versus Central. Now Central's good this year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
Central's good.
well, we went down last year, man,
Okay.
at the HBCU national championship, man, when they beat out Jackson State.
In Atlanta,
Yeah,
right? They
yeah,
beat
yeah.
Jackson State.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we sent Dion to the Pac-12
Yeah.
with no ring.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. That was when Dion was there. It wasn't
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Dion wasn't there.
yeah,
This
yeah. No, yeah, he was there.
Dion was there.
Shador was there.
Yeah.
Thomas Hunter was there. But we had to send him home packing, man. So
That's crazy. Central, they're good now. They're
yeah,
like 10-2 last year, won the championship. And it's funny because A&T
mm-hmm.
had the crown for years.
Yeah, yeah,
To
yeah,
your point,
yeah,
I
yeah,
came down those 3 years. We went to this championship. We played Alcorn. We played a couple other schools. I forget exactly who, but we beat them all.
yeah, for sure.
And then A&T decided to go up to another conference.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went up to another conference after that. But anyway, A&T had the crown for so long. And now Central has a crown.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know Central beat A&T last year
Right,
in a football game. And I think people kind of said, oh, that's they got us. But we not even doing the HBCU football no more.
right, right, right.
No disrespect.
Yeah,
We moving on. They caught us slipping. First game of the season. But now, I was telling my boy Quan here, it's not a secret no more.
yeah,
Central is not playing.
yeah, yeah. No doubt about it.
Central is not playing. They here to bust some butt. They here to get another championship.
Yeah.
And they looking at y'all like there's a big brother, little brother complex.
Mm-hmm.
And we gonna show y'all little brother done grown up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But anyway, not to get sidetracked, but just wanted to give people some context of how important this game is
Mm-hmm.
and why it's called the Aggie-Eagle Classic.
Absolutely.
And this is why I definitely wanted to get you here because you're from Durham. You chose to go to A&T. Appreciate that. And I just want to get your story. So then at A&T, you get your degree, you change or you convert into Islam, um, and then you graduate, which I'm sure everybody in your family was, super thankful and just happy that you graduated college because it's a great accomplishment, especially for a young brother like yourself coming from an inner city. And then so after college, what happened? Where'd you go? What jobs you have? How did that work out for you?
So coming out of Durham, going to AT, I always kind of had the idea that I wanted to live in a big city.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in undergrad, I had the opportunity to visit Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
a couple of times.
Yep. Yep.
And when I saw what Islam looked like in Philly, it kind of like had my eyes go, big. I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
this is what it means to be a Muslim. And this is a big city, so I was like, okay, I like this.
Yeah.
And my aunt lived there too.
Okay.
I had never visited her
Okay.
until then, but when I did, I was like, okay, I'm coming back here after I graduate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe 2 days after I graduate, man, I threw all the stuff in the back seat of my car, and I'm headed up headed up
85.
85,
Yep. Yep.
I'm like, look, I'm here, So
Right.
he's like,
Right.
all right,
Right.
come on in, So
Right.
I'm sleeping on the couch for a little while. I eventually got a job at UPenn, working in kind of working in the community
Mm-hmm.
out in West Philadelphia,
What's
and
Philly?
so that really kind of opened my eyes in terms of working with the community, being in a professional environment, and also kind of thinking about my future and what that looked like,
Right.
kind of being in psychology. I kind of had the thought that I wanted to be a clinician and now pursue like a graduate degree
Right.
in in clinical psychology.
Okay. Okay.
But I got accepted into LaSalle University
Okay.
into a master's degree in like marriage and family therapy,
Okay.
and I sat in that class maybe 2 days,
Okay. Okay.
and I was like, this
I'm
ain't
here to tell you right now, we don't care.
Let me tell you.
this ain't me, And I was at a point in
Yeah.
life where I wasn't trying to like listen to people talk about their problems for like
Mm-hmm.
hours on end. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I gotta think of something. I gotta think of another route.
Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. We have a brief announcement giving you, the viewers, an opportunity to support this program. If you've enjoyed this type of content, which highlights the achievements of a diverse set of professionals, you can support by clicking on one of the payment app links in the description below. I'm a black man with a plan who teamed up with another skilled brother and his wife, and we've decided that there's not enough stories being shared of successful and progressive diverse individuals. For instance, if you haven't caught on already, I'm from Philly, and if you're from Philly too, see if you can answer these 3 questions. Who is the most popular black actor from Philly? Okay. Who is the most successful and well-known rapper to recently come out of the city of Philadelphia? Last one. Who is the most famous and highest paid comedian to come out of Philly? Now, you didn't even have to be from the city of brotherly love to know the answer to those questions, because anyone that's been paying attention to the American culture for the past decade knows who these fine gentlemen are. And it's a testament to the talent in the city I call home. Now look, I'm not trying to name drop, although I just did, but it helps provide context for the next set of questions. Check this out. Can you name one minority individual from the city of Philadelphia who has served or currently serving as a chairman or CEO of a Fortune 500 company? Who is the most successful minority banker, venture capitalist, and or entrepreneur to come out of Philly? Currently, who is considered one of the most distinguished minority educators, lawyers, accountants, doctors, or my personal favorite, commercial real estate developer in the city of Philadelphia? Don't know? Well, I don't know either, but I'm on a mission to find these individuals, interview them, and ensure that we all know who's who going forward. Okay, now that you get my drift, here's your opportunity to support the ongoing efforts to highlight a diverse set of professionals and to inspire the next generation. Eventually, we're looking to go across the country to speak with you or someone you know at the top of their game in their respective industry and has significant community involvement. Please contact me on LinkedIn right now. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications for the latest videos on this channel. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the video.
Right.
And kind of working in that community setting in Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
it really showed me the impact of the
Mm-hmm.
built environment,
Mm-hmm.
and how your community, even the physical way it's shaped,
Mm-hmm.
shapes who you are.
Right.
Like you live in this urban environment, there's no trees around it, or you don't have access to parks, that
Yeah.
kind of really shapes your behavior, which kind of like is an extension of that psychology background that I
Right.
have. So that really kind of connected dots in my head. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And I was thinking, like, if you really want to affect people's well-being, this is me thinking from a psychologist standpoint. If you want to affect people's well-being in their life, you can shape the built environment to be conducive to that,
Mm-hmm.
in or certain experiences
Mm-hmm.
that they have.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of really shifted me into that real estate kind of construction type of a background. So I was like, okay, if you're a player in that industry, now you can have more of an impact rather
Right.
than if you're like a social worker
Right.
or a
Right.
therapist and you're going
Right.
back into remediate some type of maladjusted behavior or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
You're kind of
Yeah.
reverse engineering somebody
Right.
as opposed to, you give a kid access to a library or a park,
Yeah.
and a kid, they go out and have the experience, and you become a well-adjusted adult
Right.
as
Right.
opposed to going in reverse.
Right.
So that's what kind of made me shift into the real estate built environment space.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I ended up coming back to A&T to pursue a master's in construction management. You know, I got a scholarship there to come back to do that. It was pretty easy. You know.
All right. Before we go into that, I want to give the audience some context because, you know, we're from Philly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's another reason why we connect so
Absolutely.
so, we're from Philly. So obviously I am a little follically challenged.
No.
I'm follically challenged. So people be like, "You're from Philly for real?" Because for those of you that don't know, Philadelphia, especially, we're 80s babies.
Mhm.
So Philly in the 90s, early 2000s, I mean, whew, everybody had a beard.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, so when you grew up there, you probably were like, "Oh shoot, I fit right in,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Me growing up there, I'm like, "I don't fit in, man." Everybody like, "Where your beard at?" I'm like, "I can't grow one.
Yeah.
I can't grow."
And
And I started going bald. People were like, "Oh, what's going on with you?" I'm like, "Oh man." So people always tease me about that, but it's cool. It's cool. I still rap Philly to the death of me. I also, to your point out the neighborhoods you worked in, so strong Muslim community in West Philly
Yeah.
for sure. You know, 52nd Market, et cetera, going on. Coming to the 40s, then also in my area where I grew up, where your aunt lived,
Yeah.
in Uptown, there in the Germantown, Mount Airy area. Germantown, huge influence.
Yeah, for sure.
And for the audience to add the context to make you, so they can understand why 2 days at the school you were like, "Pew," straight to Philly.
Yeah.
Growing up at 14, 15 years old, when I was a young guy, or a young boy as we call it in Philadelphia, man, half my friends were Christian, half my friends practice Islam.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between the South and the North, especially in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, as a young guy, thinking to myself, like, do I want to become Muslim too?
Yeah.
You know, that really, because half my guys were going to the mosque and the other half were going to church. And I just grew up as an African American Baptist. So that's a strong belief system in the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And so that's why if you are a Muslim, especially a black Muslim or any type of Muslim, when you go to Philadelphia, it makes a lot of sense for you or feels comfortable because you have that community already there. So that's kind of just added some context to Philadelphia and the Islamic community. And anybody from Philly watching this can definitely understand, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s and prior to that. And there's still a community there now,
Yeah.
but back then,
Yeah.
it was strong.
And then like coming out of A&T, I mean, this was like pre 9/11, so like
Yep.
basically nobody had a beard.
Mm.
So if you had a beard, you know, it was like something that was like strange, you know, especially being in the South. You know,
In the South, right?
you know, so people are like, "Hey, you got a beard? You're like J. Will Damager," you know. And
Yes.
for some people might be watching this video, you have no idea who that is.
Yes.
But he might have been the only person that had a beard, or,
Right.
you know. So when I went to Philly, you know, the city embraced me. You know,
Yeah.
it's like my second home, and I was just like, oh, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. Not only from a place that is gonna kind of nurture my soul and my growth, but also where I can see myself growing professionally in parallel. You know, I didn't see myself having the ability to stay in the South, you know, especially the journey that I was on at that particular point in my life.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because if you sit here today with all our commonalities and the different cities we grew up in, it's funny because you could probably, people from Philly would look at you and be like, "Oh yeah, you from Philly, right? You from
Yeah, for
Germantown, you
sure.
from
Yeah,
West,
yeah.
you from North, you from South?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They look at me like, "Where you from?" "I'm Philly, man. I live right down the street from you, man."
Yeah.
"You sure, man?" You like, "Damn, man, I can't help it. It's my genes, man. It's my genes, but
all good, man.
it's all right, man. It's all right." Maybe that's why I came down south to school. Maybe because I fit better in the South. I don't know. But anyway, I still repping Philly to the death of me. So let's go back to your education. So going back to the South, you went back to North Carolina A&T for your graduate degree. What did you study and why?
Construction management, like I said, it was the department was there. It was something I was able to get into relatively easy. They had a master's in construction management in the technology department over Smith Hall. So I was able to double up on classes. They didn't require, because I was coming from the social sciences, coming from psychology, they didn't require any prerequisite classes or me to go back and do so. I did have to take a couple of like undergrad class, but I did that in tandem
Mm-hmm.
with my graduate work. They gave me a scholarship to go through that particular
Mm-hmm.
department, so it was something that was like relatively easy to do. I was living in Durham, so I was commuting back and forth,
Okay.
but it was only like a 45-minute drive, so I was working simultaneously. So it was kind of a good situation to be in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were on scholarship.
Yeah, I got a tuition scholarship
Okay.
for my tuition part of that. Yeah, so
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Now we touched on your upbringing, Durham. We touched on your immediate circle of siblings there, and your religion, and then your influence from the teachers in Durham all the way to the influence that Philadelphia had on you and stuff like that. And now we're back at North Carolina A&T getting your graduate degree. So we're kind of going around the circle here in your life. One thing I don't want to miss on, or one thing I do want to touch on, is your immediate family. So you are a married man.
Hmm.
When did you get married, and how did you meet your better half?
My wife, I think we got married in 7 years ago. So what,
Okay.
it's like 2014?
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
let me do
Okay.
some math. Yeah,
Okay.
2014, 2015. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
2015.
And
So
you met her.
I met her through some mutual friends. She's
Okay.
originally from New York, so it was a little bit.
Oh, so you got New York. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. She's from Brooklyn.
From Brooklyn.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Family's Caribbean, so we met around.
What island? What island? Hold on. You can't just say that
Yeah,
lightly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
what island?
Trinidad. Ain't
Shout out to
Trinidad.
the Trinidad.
Trinidad, yeah,
Trinidad.
yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Shout
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah,
Love soca music. She loves soca.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I love soca.
yeah, yeah.
Love soca. So my mom's Jamaican, so I'm half
Okay,
Jamaican.
okay.
But man, I tell you, man, I love the islands and love Trinidad and Tobago. Never been there,
Hmm.
but soca music, bro.
Yeah,
Whew, that's just the most joyful music in the world,
yeah, for
man.
sure.
Anyway, so going back to your family. So you met your wife. You guys got married,
Hmm.
um, and then you guys have kids.
Yeah, I got two little girls now.
Two little girls.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
so you're a girl dad, huh?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Cool, man. I'll get you a shotgun in a few
yeah,
years.
yeah, to the
I'll be
bone.
my present to you. Okay, so then at A&T Construction Management, you graduate. You interned for who?
I work for a company called Skanska, which I don't
Hmm.
know if you, but it's a pretty big company.
Yeah.
I worked with them in their office in Raleigh, Durham, while I was at A&T. Did a couple of internships with them on some projects at the convention center in Raleigh on
Okay.
Duke's campus.
Okay.
Then after I graduated, they ended up hiring me in their office in Philly, so I went back to Philly and
Okay.
worked with them for quite a number of years.
Okay then. And then after that, you got you met your wife.
Not at this particular time.
Okay. So you're
Yeah.
working. And then let's jump into the next segment of this interview. And this is one of another reason why I wanted to have you, besides our commonalities, HBCU connection.
Hmm.
So everybody knows why you went to A&T, and where you went at A&T. So let's talk about the other grad school that you went to. So you went to undergrad at A&T, grad at A&T. You're working in Philly now, and then you get the itch to do what?
Well, I came back to Carolinas for a couple of years.
Okay.
So I was working down here, and this is where I met my wife.
Okay.
And then I was working there. I've been working in project management for probably like 10 years cumulatively at this particular point. I
Okay.
always wanted to be more on the development side, transaction side, learn more about real estate.
Mhm.
So um, for some reason, the company I was working with at the time, they sent me to a job in the Shenandoah Mountains in the western part of Virginia,
Wow. Okay.
which is basically the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And they sent me up there to work on this Merck project, and I was out there building that. Was staying in an Airbnb.
Yeah.
Was only working Monday through Thursdays, and for some reason, man, I got it in the back of my mind. I told my wife, I said, "Yo, let's go up the let's go visit Cornell." And I don't know where it came from. And the idea, it was kind of planted in the back of my head when I had before I went to graduate school at A&T. So I knew I wanted to kind of be in the built environment, be in the real estate space and stuff.
Hmm.
So I used to look at all these different graduate programs in real estate and
Okay.
construction. So
Okay.
and I remember I had like a stack of brochures in my mom's house from like NYU,
Right.
Cornell, USC, University of Florida,
Okay.
blah blah blah, all these
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
So I had an idea like all these different graduate programs,
Right.
but I went to A&T because they gave me the scholarship. Like I said, it was, it was kind of a no-brainer. I was still at home in Durham.
Yeah.
It was really kind of a low barrier to entry. It really wasn't gonna impact me economically to
Yeah.
go back to graduate school at A&T. So that's kind of where I made that decision
For
from.
sure. For sure.
So I had all these graduate programs in the back of my head, and for some reason the idea jumped in my head while we was up there in the mountains of Virginia. I was like, yo, let me see how far Ithaca is from here.
So hold on. So you in Virginia, West Virginia.
Western Virginia.
Oh, Western Virginia.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
West Virginia.
Which is probably like worse than actual West Virginia. So and like I think the biggest city from where we was at, I was in, I think it's Jamestown or Harrisburg, Virginia.
Okay.
The biggest city next to that might be Lynchburg or Charlottesville, which is where
Okay.
UVA is at. So
Okay.
we like in suburban Charlottesville, which is already
Wow.
suburban.
Right. That's crazy, man. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So your wife she tagged along for the ride while you were on your business trip,
Yeah.
and then you just got the idea. I mean, obviously, you just talked about how you kind of had this seed planting you had a long time ago,
Yeah.
but while you were there, boom, that thing bursted out and blossomed a little bit or started bubbling at least.
Yeah.
And you said, let's go to Ithaca.
Yeah.
So what happened?
So I said, let's go up there. I said, I want to check out Cornell because I was like, I'm at a point in my career where I really want to be on the development transactional side of things. But every time I talk to people in the industry, they're like, well, you need to know more about financial, or you need to have this experience and that experience. I say, well, maybe I need to go back to school again, but I really didn't want to go back to school at this particular time.
Right.
But I said, okay, if I'm gonna go back to school, it's gonna be at the best place, So that seed was in the back of my head. So I looked at Cornell's program a little bit more in depth. I said, okay, let's take a ride, So the company I was with, they was giving me a free rental car, free gas. So it was like okay, I can do this.
Okay.
So we went up there.
Yeah.
It was Apple Fest weekend, which is like the best time to be in Ithaca.
Okay.
It's like the weather's awesome. It's the beginning of the fall.
Okay.
The waterfall's there. It's beautiful. And most people who go into Cornell's program, they kind of have a idea that that's where they want to go. They filled out an application, and then as part of that application process, you visit the school, and they get a idea of who you are, and then so first the typical process is that you apply, they're via app, they invite you to the school, blah blah blah, and then you get accepted or rejected. So I kind of did it in reverse. I hadn't applied it. I was just like, hey,
wow,
I'm checking y'all out, to see if it's even worth my time.
Wow, you told Courtney. All right.
Yeah, so I was there for the weekend. It was Apple Fest weekend. Like I said, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, this is a nice place. I went to talk to a couple people in admissions. A couple of grad students had toured me around, sat in a couple of classes. I was like, okay, I'm feeling it.
So you just pulled up, told them what you were looking for, and they put you on a little quick tour and got some people to talk to you, etc.
Yeah,
wow.
I sent them an email. I said, look, I'm thinking about applying. I'm interested. Can y'all set something up for me? So like, sure, come on up. We'll set up a tour with a couple of students in the program.
Oh, nice.
You could talk to somebody in admissions and, just kind of get a feel. So that's pretty much what I did over that couple of days. And,
And let's tell the audience like what program exactly this was, just in case.
This is the Baker Masters in Real Estate program, which is a 2-year full-time degree program. So when I had the idea of going back to graduate school, and I looked at what Cornell had to offer relative to other graduate institutions or graduate programs, I felt that for me, it was the best usage of my particular time and resources. Like if I'm gonna go back to graduate school, if I'm gonna take a break from working full time, then I'm gonna go to the best program. I'm gonna go to something that's gonna teach me about real estate from soup to nuts, so I'm totally equipped to be in that particular industry.
That's awesome.
And kind of learn everything that I need to be marketable.